Welcome to our deep dive. We're going deep on deep work today, and you've given us some really interesting stuff to work with, excerpts from Cal Newport's book, Even Research on Memory Champions. It's clear you're fascinated by how we can focus better in a world full of distractions.
Yeah, and what's interesting is Newport's not just talking about working harder, he's talking about working smarter. The sources you've sent really highlight how valuable, focused, undistracted work is becoming, especially as our economy becomes more and more knowledge-based.
Definitely. The sources point to two key skills that are becoming increasingly important: the ability to master difficult things quickly and the ability to produce at an elite level in terms of quality and speed. It sounds like deep work is the key to both.
It does seem that way. And, the historical examples you've included really illustrate this point. Take Carl Jung, for example. He built a tower in the woods specifically to escape distractions and focus on his writing. It wasn't just about solitude, it was a deliberate decision, a structure designed to promote deep thinking. And look at the impact his work has had. His theories are still studied and debated today.
That's so true. It wasn't just a random retreat. It was a strategic decision to prioritize deep work. And we see this pattern with other successful people too. Remember Mark Twain? He famously retreated to a shed to write The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. And even Bill Gates, the ultimate tech guy, built Think Weeks into his schedule where he'd isolate himself to read and think.
Exactly. It's fascinating that these people from different eras and fields all recognize the power of deep work long before the internet and smartphones came along. They seemed to intuitively understand that to produce truly great work, they needed space for focused thought.
But now, as you said, it feels like that space is constantly under attack. There's a study in the material that says the average knowledge worker spends over 60% of their time on electronic communication and internet searching. And get this, almost 30% of that is just dealing with email. Imagine if we could reclaim even a fraction of that time for deep work.
Yeah, it's a symptom of what Cal Newport calls busyness as a proxy for productivity. Knowledge work is hard to measure, so we often end up valuing visible busyness over actual focused productivity. We answer emails lightning fast, attend endless meetings, and check social media constantly, all to give the impression that we're working hard.
It's like we're addicted to feeling busy, even if it means we're not actually getting anything meaningful done. It makes you wonder, is anyone really thinking deeply anymore?
That's the question, isn't it? And the irony is that while many are busy updating their status and attending back-to-back meetings, those who embrace deep work are quietly mastering complex skills and producing work that truly stands out. They're learning to code, writing groundbreaking articles, developing new technologies.
So how do we become one of those people? Is it even possible in today's world? It seems like there isn't one right answer.
You're right, there isn't. Cal Newport describes 4 different philosophies for integrating deep work into your life: monastic, bimodal, rhythmic, and journalistic. And they all have their own strengths and weaknesses depending on your personality and work style.
Okay, let's break those down. Monastic. I'm picturing a writer who locks themselves in a cabin for months to finish a book. That sounds pretty extreme.
You're not far off. It's about eliminating or drastically reducing shallow obligations to make as much time as possible for deep work. It's not for everyone, but it can be incredibly effective for those who need long stretches of uninterrupted focus.
Okay, then there's bimodal. That sounds a little more balanced.
It is. It involves switching back and forth between long periods of deep work and periods of more shallow engagement. Think of J.K. Rowling when she was writing the Harry Potter books. She'd disappear for stretches to write, then re-emerge to engage with the publishing world.
Got it. And I'm guessing rhythmic is about establishing a consistent habit like Jerry Seinfeld's daily writing streak.
Exactly. It's about making deep work a regular part of your routine. Even just 30 minutes of focused work every morning can lead to amazing results over time.
So it's about finding that balance where deep work becomes a sustainable part of your life.
Yeah.
And what about journalistic deep work? That sounds like how I imagine a journalist working, writing in between interviews and events.
Exactly. This one's all about fitting deep work in wherever you can find the time. It's perfect for people who have less control over their schedules, but still want to make deep work a priority.
So it seems like there's a deep work philosophy out there for everyone. But knowing the philosophies is just the start, right? The real challenge is putting them into action.
Absolutely. And that's where it gets really interesting. The sources you provided offer some surprisingly practical advice on how to train your brain for deep work, almost like building mental strength for focus.
Like if I all ears. Is there like a deep work gym I can join?
Aha! If only it were that easy. But the sources offer some great insights. The first thing is that willpower is like a muscle. It gets tired with use.
Mhm.
So minimizing distractions is crucial for making deep work last.
Yeah, but that's easier said than done. Our world is built on distractions. Where do you even begin to fight that?
One strategy is to schedule internet time. By deciding when you'll check email, social media, and other distractions, you're training your mind to be okay with not having something new all the time.
So instead of trying to avoid the internet completely, which probably isn't realistic, we should be more mindful about when and how we use it.
Right. It's about taking control of your attention instead of letting the internet control you. And there's this other interesting idea called productive meditation. You might find it helpful.
Productive meditation. Doesn't that seem like a contradiction? I thought meditation was about clearing your mind, not being productive.
It might sound counterintuitive, but it involves using simple activities like walking, showering, even doing the dishes to think about things related to work.
So instead of checking our phones when we have a few minutes, we should use that time to think.
That's it. By giving your mind the space to think about work-related things during downtime, you're setting yourself up for deeper focus later when you actually sit down to work on those tasks.
Wow, I never thought about it like that. It's like clearing your mind before you start the real work.
It's funny, when I think about those historical figures we talked about, they didn't have smartphones to distract them. Maybe all that downtime actually fueled their creativity.
That's an interesting thought.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they were onto something without even realizing it. And speaking of mental exercises, the sources also highlight a link between memory training and better attention control.
Wait, are you saying memorizing a deck of cards could actually help me focus at work? That's a cool party trick, but
I know it sounds crazy, but that's what the research suggests. Activities like memorizing decks of cards, long lists of numbers, or poems force your brain to practice concentrating and ignoring distractions.
so it's like a workout for your attention span. Who knew memory champions were the key to a focused mind?
Right. The connections are amazing. Now let's get back to the online world and its distractions. The sources argue that we often fall into the trap of justifying social media use with any tiny benefit we can think of. They call this the any benefit approach. Oh, I totally do that. It helps me stay connected with friends. It's good for my business. I might miss out on something. It's like we're always looking for reasons to stay plugged in instead of actually thinking about its real value.
Exactly. And they contrast this with what they call the craftsman approach. It's about choosing tools based on their actual impact on our goals and happiness, not just on any small benefit they might have.
So instead of scrolling through Facebook because it keeps us connected, we should ask ourselves if that connection is actually meaningful and if it's good for us overall.
Yes. A great way to figure this out is to try a 30-day social media experiment.
30 days without social media.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're really challenging us to go all in on this deep work stuff. I don't know if I could do it.
Think of it as a chance to break free from the constant demands for your attention and see how social media really affects you. You might be surprised at what you learn.
You know what? I think you're right. I'm going to try it. What's the worst that could happen? That's the spirit. Now, for those who need social media for work, there are ways to use it better so it doesn't run your life. That actually brings us to our next topic, which is all about making time for deep work in our busy lives.
Perfect. I'm ready to ditch the distractions and get focused. What do we do?
So let's talk about some practical strategies. One of the most powerful and maybe the most intimidating is to schedule every minute of your day.
Every minute.
Really?
I can barely decide what to have for breakfast, let alone plan out every single minute of my day.
I know it sounds like a lot, but the idea isn't to become a robot. It's more about being deliberate about how you spend your time, even your free time. Think of it like you're designing your ideal day instead of just letting it happen.
Okay, that makes it sound a little less scary. So
Yeah.
instead of mindlessly scrolling on my phone while I wait for my coffee,
Hmm.
I could use that time to do something more meaningful.
Exactly. By planning your day, you're wasting less time on those shallow activities and opening up more time for deep work. It's about being proactive with your time, not just reacting to whatever comes up.
Wow. I can see how that would make a difference. But honestly, scheduling every minute still seems like a lot. Where do you even start?
A good place to start is by figuring out how deep each activity in your day is. The sources you sent over suggest asking yourself, how long would it take to train a new college grad to do this activity?
So if it would take months of training, that means it's a high-depth activity, right? Because it requires specialized knowledge and skills.
Exactly. And if you could explain the task in a few minutes, it's probably a low-depth activity.
That's a really helpful way to look at it. And I'm starting to realize how much of my day is filled with those low-depth tasks.
It can be eye-opening, right? Once you see that you can start shifting your focus towards the deeper, more impactful activities. Now, you might be wondering how to make this work in real life, especially with your boss and coworkers. They're often the ones adding to that pile of shallow work, aren't they?
Oh yeah, all the time. It feels like I'm drowning in emails, meetings, and urgent requests that pull me away from the stuff that really matters. It's
Yeah.
so frustrating.
I get it. And that's where talking to your boss is so important. The sources you sent emphasize how important it is to speak up for deep work. Don't just complain about being overloaded, go to your boss with a plan. Suggest cutting back on shallow work and focusing on a set ratio of deep to shallow work time.
So it's about being proactive and suggesting a solution instead of just pointing out the problem.
Right. If you frame it as a way to be more productive and contribute more to the team, your boss will be more likely to support your deep work goals.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about email. It's like the biggest productivity black hole. Do the sources offer any hope for taming this beast?
They do. They actually have some great strategies for taking control of your inbox. One of the most effective is the sender filter. It's about setting clear expectations for what types of emails you will and will not respond to.
So instead of feeling like we have to answer every email, we can set up filters that prioritize the most important messages. I like where this is going.
Exactly. And the sources have some great real-world examples of how this works. Cal Newport, for example, only responds to proposals that fit his schedule and interests.
Wow, that's pretty bold. I can see how that would cut down on email overload big time.
It's about being selective with your time and energy. Another example is Kay Herbert, a consultant who helps people with crowdfunding. He has a filter that requires people who want his advice to pay a consulting fee first.
That's smart. That way he's only spending time on people who are serious about getting his help.
Right. It's about valuing your time and setting boundaries. There are lots of ways to use a sender filter. The key is to find what works for you.
So sender filters are about being proactive and setting boundaries instead of just reacting to every email that comes in, like taking control of the game instead of letting the game control you.
I like that analogy. And when you do need to reply to an email, there are ways to do it more efficiently. The sources talk about a process-centric approach.
Okay, what's that?
It's about writing replies that wrap up the conversation instead of just going back and forth.
So instead of just answering a question, we should aim to give all the information that's needed to resolve the issue right then and there.
You got it. For instance, if someone wants to schedule a meeting, instead of just saying you're free, give them a few specific times that work for you and any other details they need.
That way you don't get stuck in a long email chain about scheduling. Love it. It's like being one step ahead of the email game.
Exactly. It's a small change, but it can really save you time and mental energy. And there's another approach called the professorial approach that I find interesting.
Professorial. Are we talking tweed jackets and stroking our beards while we think about complicated ideas?
Not quite, but there's a good lesson to learn from how some professors handle their email. They basically don't respond unless the sender makes a really good case for why they should.
So it's about making the sender explain why they need a response instead of feeling like you have to answer everyone. I guess in academia time is really precious.
It is. And of course, this approach might not be realistic for everyone, especially if you work in a fast-paced environment, but it's a good way to start thinking differently about email.
It's about being more careful with our attention and realizing that not every email needs a reply. We get to choose where we focus our energy. Now, this all sounds great for being more productive at work, but I'm curious, how does deep work apply to the rest of our lives? Does it matter if we're not trying to get ahead at work or write a book?
That's a great question, and it brings up a really important point about deep work. It's not just about productivity or achievements, it's also about finding meaning and fulfillment. It's about approaching anything you do, whether it's for work or for yourself, with intention and focus.
So how do we find that meaning and fulfillment in everyday life? I mean, doing laundry and washing dishes aren't exactly deep work, are they?
You're right, not all tasks are created equal, but even those everyday things can be more meaningful if we do them with focus and intention.
Okay, I'm listening. Okay, I'm listening. Tell me more.
Tell
Tell me more.
Think about a skilled craftsman, like a blacksmith or a woodworker. They spend hours perfecting their craft, focusing intensely on every little detail. There's a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment that comes from being so engaged with their work.
Yeah, I see that. There's something beautiful about mastering a skill and creating something with your own two hands. But a lot of us work with emails and spreadsheets, not hammers and chisels.
Yeah.
How can we find that same sense of meaning in those kinds of jobs?
That's where it gets really interesting. The sources suggest that even though the work is different, the same principles apply. When we do deep work, whether it's writing code, creating a marketing plan, or doing research, we tap into those same feelings of satisfaction and fulfillment.
So it's about approaching our work with the same passion and attention to detail as a master craftsman, finding fulfillment in the work itself. It's not just about the finished product, it's about the journey of getting there.
Exactly. And one way to cultivate this is to focus on getting better at what you do. When you challenge yourself to learn new things, to push your abilities, you create a sense of purpose and mastery. It's about becoming a lifelong learner, always looking for ways to grow and expand your knowledge and skills.
So instead of just going through the motions, we should look for opportunities to learn and deepen our expertise, becoming more like those craftsmen, always honing our skills and trying to get better.
That's it. And the sources emphasize that this process of learning and getting better is a deep work activity in itself. We need those times of focused concentration to really understand new information and develop our abilities. It's like working out a muscle. The more we use it, the stronger it gets.
So deep work isn't just about producing more or working faster. It's about being engaged with our work in a way that makes us feel good and gives us a sense of purpose. That makes a lot of sense. But with all this talk about focus and concentration, I have to ask, what about downtime? Don't we need breaks to recharge and avoid burnout?
We absolutely do. The sources talk about how important it is to create the right conditions for deep work, both physically and mentally. And part of that is knowing when to take a break and recharge.
So it's not just about having a quiet place to work, but also about being in the right headspace, knowing when to push yourself and when to relax.
Exactly. Cal Newport talks about creating a deep work ritual, a set of habits that tell your brain it's time to focus.
So it's like a mental switch that helps you go from relaxing to working.
That's a great way to put it. It could be something as simple as making tea, putting on headphones, or going for a walk before you start working. And when it's time to relax, have a ritual for that too.
Interesting. Does the physical space where you work matter too?
It can definitely help. Having a dedicated workspace, even if it's just a corner of your desk at home, can make a big difference. The key is to make it a distraction-free zone, a place where you can really concentrate. It's about separating work from leisure, so your mind knows it's time to focus when you're in that space.
So no working from the couch with the TV on in the background.
Yeah.
Got it.
Ideally not. But remember, even if you have the perfect setup, there will be times when your focus drifts. The key is to have a plan for getting back on track.
We could all use help with that. What do we do when we feel ourselves getting distracted?
One surprisingly effective strategy is to just let yourself be bored.
Embrace boredom. Isn't that like the opposite of being productive? How could that help us focus?
I know it sounds weird, but think about it. When we always check our phones or email, as soon as we feel a little bored, we're actually making it harder to concentrate. We're teaching our brains to expect constant stimulation.
So by letting ourselves get bored, we're actually strengthening our mental focus.
You got it. The next time you're waiting in line, fight the urge to check your phone. Just be bored and see what happens. It might be uncomfortable at first, but eventually you'll find that you're better at handling those moments without needing a distraction.
It's like taking a break from all the stimulation we're constantly bombarded with. And when we do need a break from deep work, the sources talk about how important it is to really disconnect.
Right. Don't just scroll through social media or watch TV. Get out in nature. Spend time with people you care about. Do hobbies that make you happy.
So it's about giving our minds a chance to fully switch off from work. So when we go back to deep work, we're refreshed and ready to focus.
Exactly. You know, after spending all this time talking about deep work, I'm really struck by how it's more than just a way to be more productive. It's a whole philosophy, a way of living. It's about taking control of our time and attention, focusing on what's important, and finding meaning and fulfillment along the way.
I totally agree. It's about being mindful of where we spend our energy and our time. So as we wrap up our deep dive today, we'd love to hear from you. What stood out to you? What's one small change you can make this week to bring more deep work into your own life? Let us know.